Snow and Shadows by the 24th Pegasus. Prologue. Frozen Caverns. There was no movement within the black halls, stone crested stone, only to stop in reverence towards what lay within. Stagnant air filled the structure, having not moved for centuries around the artificial corners of the forgotten masonry. Not even spiders or other vermin dared to ruin the sanctity of the crypt, or disturb what holy treasure might lie within. It was cold, hellishly cold on several tons of rock and mountain. If there had been any water within the caves, it would have frozen at the slightest contact with the bitter stone, but the still air was dry, and unbearably so, with not a trace of moisture in the halls. Their creators had made sure of that long ago. A deep bass tremor reverberated through the rock, shaking loose specks of dirt and gravel. Such a movement seemed to disturb the solemn sanctity of the caves, and the stone began to rumble angrily, violently. As more and more of the rock began to collapse from the ceiling and into the open space below, the timeless wall of the crypt was breached. The first trace of a lavender glow faded from sight in the nearly open ceiling. Mane, horn, and purple irises peered cautiously into the settling dust, waiting to see if more stone would collapse from the ceiling. After a few rocks popped noisily out of the walls and clattered across the rough floor, the solemn silence returned to its home. Using a caution to overrule her academic excitement, the unicorn mare climbed over the boulders in front of her to look into the void of darkness within the crypt. She waited there for several seconds, as if expecting something to materialize from behind her. After no such event happened, she huffed and turned back towards the entrance of the cavern. Feeble northern sunlight provided meager illumination to the immediate area, but after traveling nearly 50 feet of jagged, smoldering stone, it might as well have been non-existent.
Rainbow Dash!
Her voice echoed in an alien manner amongst the walls of stone that had not known the burden of sound for numerous years. After receiving no response, the unicorn's brow furrowed in annoyance. She released another foggy breath.
Rainbow! Can you please come down here and bring those torches you have with you? It's dark in here.
A distant voice reached her, pitched and cracky in a pleasantly enduring way.
Can't you just use your magic twilight? Why do I have to go?
Reluctance permeated her words as they strained to travel through the roughly carved tunnel into the mountain. The unicorn known as Twilight Sparkle only swished her purple and magenta tail in agitation at Rainbow Dash's reluctance.
Because I spent the last half hour blasting through all that rock. My horn is spent, Rainbow. Even I need to take a break sometimes.
The sigh of defeat was barely audible from outside the tunnel, and a vibrant Pegasus mare flooded into the cavern and set some torches down in front of Twilight.
There! I got him. Can I go back outside now?
Twilight picked up one of the torches and provided a small spark from her horn to ignite it. After placing it in the sconce, she set it aside and turned back to Rainbow Dash. The colorful mare, with her powdery blue coat and prismatic mane and tail, was flashing her magenta eyes to the flickering shadows amongst the wall and ceiling. She was taking great effort to keep her knees from shaking, but her ever-active wings betrayed her. The tips of the sleek and powerful appendages switched nervously, and the feathers were slightly flared to her sides in worry.
What's the matter, Rainbow? Are you nervous?
Twilight had precisely calculated her question, and it brought forth the reaction she anticipated from her companion.
No! I'm just...
Rainbow slid her hoof over a few gravely pebbles as she wheeled her anxiety away.
I just don't like caves. They're a little, small.
Not one to be shown up, she grabbed a torch and lit it before trotting deeper into the tunnels. Twilight smiled and grabbed her own torch before following her. One of the many natural quirks of the Pegasus race was their aversion to confined spaces, as they preferred the open sky to the subterranean spelunking. Rainbow Dash's concern, as much as she tried to hide it, was therefore understandable to the unicorn scholar. The hallway continued into darkness, and even after lighting several sconces, the exit remained hidden in shadow. The stone floor was blisteringly cold, and the explorers' hooves were becoming numb. Stopping at a bowl filled with tinder and other fuel, Twilight and Rainbow Dash paused to warm their bodies and admire some of the ancient glyphs carved into the walls.
Amazing,
Twilight whispered as she studied the carvings. Reaching into a saddlebag, she withdrew a roll of paper and some charcoal. Using her magic to hold the paper against the wall, she quickly made a rubbing of the characters, prepared the materials for more.
I don't get it. Just looks like some of Scoot's mouth writing to me.
Rainbow half grumbled, half joked to herself. The alphabet, if it could be called one, consisted largely of simple scratchy lines interspersed with occasional pictograms. The panel of the whole, as a whole, looked little more than a nasty tangle of hair or spider web to the untrained Pegasus, although with some intrinsic order behind it. Twilight rolled up her third rubbing of the wall and sat back to admire the work as it was.
They're ancient Pegasus glyphs, actually. Before the invocation of the three tribes under the equestrian banner, the Pegasi used this sort of simple alphabet to form their messages, unlike earth ponies or unicorns.
Rainbow Dash's ears perked ever so slightly.
What? You mean like in the story, like that play we did a while back on Earth's Warming Eve with Commander Hurricane and all them? Yes, exactly. After that play, I was interested in learning about the three tribes. There's so much forgotten in history we don't know about today.
Twilight's eyes glowed with academic gleam that possessed her whenever she got a chance to talk about something she learned, but Rainbow angled her head to the side in confusion.
I thought the story was the history of the three tribes. You know, how they all hated each other and then that big blizzard came and they were like, oh no, we gotta find a new home. And then they go and find a new land, but they all claimed it at the same time, so then they fight and then they get trapped in the cave and almost get frozen. But then the fire of friendship drives away the window thingies and they all live happily ever after. Right?
Twilight chuckled at Rainbow's very succinct retelling of the traditional Earth's warming story and shook her head.
Yes, well, that's what the official story is now. Don't forget, this was almost 8,000 years ago. A lot can be forgotten in that time. For example, have you heard about what life was like for the tribes before the blizzard, and other than that, it was really bad and hated each other?
Magenta eyes searched the intricate wall for answers, but ultimately Rainbow shrugged her wings.
Can't say I have. So what, you think you found more of the forgotten history, or whatever it is in this place?
Twilight slowly stood up, and used her magic to grab a torch as she began to walk again.
Actually, I found a lot of information about the ancient unicorns and earth ponies in the Star-Swirled Bearded section of the Candelot Library, but there's almost nothing on the Pegasi. Any information I came across was second hoof and dated within the 2 decades of the Eternal Blizzard event, and by that time, the tribes hated each other so much that half the material was little more than slander and rumors against them. The only direct accounts of Pegasus history came from burial temples like these scattered throughout the north. Wait, so you've already been to some of these places before?
Rainbow raised an interested eyebrow as she brought her eyes off the ceiling and back to her friend.
Yes, but only one. It was actually located under the remains of what was believed to be an old Pegasus settlement in the Far East, before the tribes unified. I found this there, and provided a lot of startling but interesting information about the ancient Pegasi.
Stopping to look through her bags, Twilight withdrew a tattered book. The binding material caused Rainbow to drop back in alarm.
Leather? They use leather? That's disgusting!
Although the Pegasus stuck her tongue out at the tanned hide of another animal, Twilight simply continued to trot along, although not without keeping the book a good distance from her.
It is appalling, but these Pegasi came from a different time, a different landmass even. Without the farming magic of the earth ponies, they had to resort to some pretty extreme measures to provide food for themselves.
Rainbow Dash stopped in place as the words sunk in, then quickly galloped to Twilight's side.
Wait. A different landmass? No earth ponies? What do you mean?
Twilight opened the book with her magic as she walked.
This book is actually the journal of Commander Hurricane. He described a Pegasus empire called Syrah that existed across the ocean to the east in what is known as the country of Grivage. He was actually the emperor for a few months before it collapsed.
Temptation to grab the journal and read for herself to make sure Twilight wasn't messing with her crossed Rainbow's mind. But she quickly realized it was encoded in the same scratchy lettering that had adorned the wall behind them. Instead, she had to assume Twilight was speaking the truth, even if it didn't make sense. The pages of the book fluttered by rapidly as the unicorn stuck her nose in it and reviewed the material.
Apparently, the Syrian Empire was the original home of every Pegasus in the world. They neighbored the Griffins, and they most certainly didn't get along. And by didn't get along, you mean they hated each other and fought because of it.
Twilight's eyes grew dark as she closed the book and levitated it back to her satchel.
Their entire history was nothing but death and war. First with the Pegasi dominating the Griffins, and then with the Griffins destroying the Syrian Empire. Millions died. Millions! The only reason the bloodshed stopped was because the Syrians fled to the equestrian landmass. Otherwise,
she turned to Rainbow.
The Griffins might have exterminated your kind.
A heated anger awoke in Rainbow Dash's chest, though for what reason she couldn't tell why.
You don't know that! I mean, Gilda told me tales about Grivage's military ancestry and whatnot, but there's no way to do something like that.
Steamy puffs of breath escaped from her nose, and wings flared open in anger and shock. Startled, Twilight quickly moved closer to Rainbow and placed her hooves on Dash's blue shoulders to calm her down.
Rainbow, I didn't mean anything by it. I'm just saying that both sides have a very dark history, as hard as it is to believe as it is today. And like I said, it was a different time. Pegasus and Griffins alike have changed for the better. War on such a scale hasn't been seen in years.
She took her hoof off the Pegasus' shoulders and waited.
Taking several deep breaths, Rainbow glanced down at her hooves. Yeah, you're right. It's just, I don't know. It's pointless. Who knows what those Griffins or ponies could have done if they hadn't died?
She sighed, and with a powerful shake of her wings, she seemed to fling away her bad thoughts and begin to walk again.
Guess that explains why they were known for being tough. Never occurred to me that my entire history was founded on war.
Twilight sympathized with the colorful mare's plight, but they continued to walk on in silence. As torches were lit and sconces were filled, the end of the hallway finally came into view in the form of a massive, featureless wall. Rainbow Dash nearly dropped the torch as he groaned aloud.
Please don't tell me we went the wrong way.
I don't think so, Twilight answered as she stepped forward to observe the wall. Setting her gear down, she withdrew a few tools from her satchel and dusted at the surface. The stone was incredibly smooth and cut with the kind of craftsmanship that any mason today could only dream of. If the rock were made out of a lighter stone, such as marble, instead of the dark granite, it would have been possible to see one's reflection in it. Rainbow was content at first to watch Twilight scan the surface of the wall with her magic, but after the first 5 minutes, the boredom became unbearable. She had nothing to read, and attempting to glean anything from the scratchy Syrian writings that decorated the hall was doomed to failure. Flying sprints up and down the length of the passageway and timing herself would have occupied Dash for 10 or so minutes, but the air was so cold her feathers were freezing and her wings were beginning to numb. Instead, she had to resort to helping Twilight study the wall in what was bound to be a fruitless endeavor against the unicorn's trained eye. That was why she was surprised when her eyes glanced across the symbol of a horseshoe encompassing a thunderbolt that Twilight had apparently missed. Instead of a carving, however, the icons glowed a soft white. Getting up from her seat against the wall, Rainbow Dash walked over to the symbol and lowered her nose towards it.
Hey, Twilight, what's this funny thing mean?
She pointed towards the symbol and Twilight trotted over for a closer look. The lavender mare's eyes narrowed and she angled her head to the side. After a few seconds of study, she raised a skeptical eyebrow towards Rainbow.
What are you talking about? I don't see anything.
Confused,
Rainbow rubbed her eyes to make sure she wasn't seeing things and tightened her expression.
What do you mean you can't see anything? It's right here!
She gestured to the wall, but Twilight simply shook her head. Mildly annoyed, Rainbow pressed a hoof on top of the symbol, then jumped in surprise as it slid into the wall. There was a precursory click as stone met stone, and a tiny blade pierced the soft tissue near her fetlocks. The Pegasus shouted and quickly withdrew her limbs, licking at the trickle of blood the blade had spawned. Alarmed, Twilight quickly grabbed a strip of gauze from her bag and wrapped it around Twilight's leg.
Oh my gosh! Rainbow, are you okay? Let me see what I can do.
Her horn flared up briefly as she prepared a spell, but Rainbow Dash took it away.
Jeez, Twilight, calm down. I'm fine.
It's just a little scratch. Stupid serum booby traps, she muttered. Setting her hoof down, she approached the newly formed insert at the wall and looked at it cautiously.
Just what in the name of Tartarus was I supposed to do?
A deep vibration from the wall cut off her words. Surprised, the two ponies leapt back several feet from the now shaking partition as it shook ancient dust and gravel loose. With a hideous groan, the massive rocks, over 5 feet thick, split apart at the center and withdrew into the walls. Rows of torches suddenly sprang to life from within, providing the dim orange light to illuminate the massive stone crypt. Rainbow had never been more stunned in her life. If her jaw could have hit the floor, it would have, but instead she found herself lying on her back and grasped her scratched foreleg and all. Twilight was no better off, and her horn crackled with the excess surprise escaping in the form of diffuse magic. Together, they stood up, and Rainbow glanced between her hoof and the open chamber with incredulity.
What?
Was all the confused Pegasus could produce. Once Twilight had overcome her initial shock, she began to apply her encyclopedic knowledge to the situation. Turning back to Rainbow, she unwrapped the bandage from her blue foreleg and looked at the cut again. A smile at the unexpected fortune lit her face.
I get it now. The door was attuned to Pegasus and Partha. That's why I couldn't find the opening. Because it was only specifically designed to be opened only by a Pegasus.
Twilight's hooves clopped against the stone as she jumped in excitement.
I'm so glad I brought you along, Rainbow.
The Pegasus scratched her mane abashedly and chuckled.
In here I thought you wanted me for my speed to get up here. But wait, didn't you see one of these places before? What the haze and Empavuza?
Twilight gathered her bags and began to trot into the crypt, with Rainbow not far behind.
Well, first, the place I'd visited before didn't nearly have as tight as a security system or a grand decor as this one. And second, it's Impartha. It's what gives Pegasus their magic. What, like standing on clouds and stuff? Yes, exactly. Princess Celestia taught me about it last week before I started this expedition. The 3 different pony races all have natural magic inherent in their forms. The unicorns have Arcana, the other ponies have Endura, and the Pegasus have Impartha. They all manifest in different forms.
Twilight set her bags down on a nearby table and crackled her horn for effect.
Arcana is the most direct form of magic. By channeling a unicorn's mana, it allows us to cast spells that affect the world around us, whether they be physical or illusionary. Endura is the reason why Earth ponies can grow food so well and why they're naturally stronger than Pegasi or unicorns. And Impartha allows Pegasus to fly, stand on clouds, and control the weather and elements of nature. Fluttershy's stare is an expression of Impartha.
Grabbing a few tools and pouches, Twilight began to examine the crypt's contents.
The magic is carried in the pony's bloodstream, which is why unicorns can't give blood to Pegasi, and so on and so forth. Wow.
Rainbow Dash brushed a hoof lightly against the ground as she thought.
I guess you could have gotten here without me then. But wait, how come I never heard of this Impartha stuff before? It sounds pretty important being part of a Pegasus.
That's probably because most of the majority of Pegasi only use it passively. The Pegasi in the Royal and Honor Guards are trained how to use it actively. But I wouldn't know anything other than it can help in combat. Frankly, and pardon my generalization here, but most Pegasi don't go on to study magics like unicorns do. That's just how it works, and they don't bother to question it.
Heh, I guess you're right. I never bothered to figure it out either, but it's kind of awesome.
The torches in the crypt were finally bringing heat to the frigid air, and Rainbow Dash began to hover and stretch her wings.
So, what do you want to find?
Hopefully I don't have to stick my hooves on any more of those stimple thingies.
Twilight surveyed the room and pointed to some bookshelves against the far walls.
Find anything that seems interesting over there. Leather-bound books would be a good start, but they're only used by the students before coming here. Thick tomes, well, the thicker the better.
Rainbow Dash nodded and flew towards one of the towering bookshelves to pour out its contents. Most of the books were made of canvas and tree bark backing, but there were a few leather books as well. She set those books aside, as well as some of the larger ones she came across. As she pulled off more and more books, a hidden space behind the bookshelf began to appear. Curious, Rainbow took a whole section of books off the shelf and carefully set them on the floor. A rectangular hole opened up before her, with a simple, bound yet perfectly conditioned book inside. Gingerly taking the tome out of its compartment, Rainbow opened the pristine cover and looked at the perfectly white pages. Equish alphabetical symbols greeted her, eliciting a small grin of triumph from the Pegasus. Being careful not to damage the work, Rainbow Dash fluttered down to where Twilight was sifting through the books with their Syrian titles.
Hey Twilight, check this one out.
Depositing the book on top of the stack that the unicorn was reviewing, Rainbow dropped onto her hooves and waited. Carefully levitating the tome in front of her, Twilight began to flip through her pages. Her eyes widened with each successive page of Equish print, accompanied by fine mouth-drawn sketches adjacent to blocks of text. Trotting over to one of the stone tables, she set it down and began to scrutinize the volume in question.
Rainbow, this is incredible! Where did you find this?
The sly grin that was common on the accomplished mayor's face returned once more as she glided towards Twilight's side.
In that bookshelf over there, it was placed in a little hole behind a whole bunch of other books.
And Twilight flipped the book over and tested the pages.
Such a perfect condition, and in Equish too. I would have said this was definitely made within the last 20 years, but Commander Hurricane's signature is right here, inside the cover. It's definitely from the time, even if it doesn't look it. Couldn't somebody have just forged it and put it for here to find?
Rainbow Dash said as she shrugged her shoulders and poked the book warily. Twilight shook her head and opened it to the beginning narration.
There are some things that can't fool good magic, and luckily you're dealing with an expert. Besides, it wouldn't make sense. Why make a fake historical record, travel all the way to some hidden crypt, hide it amongst some several other books, and leave without taking anything? It wouldn't add up. No.
She tapped her hoof affirmatively against the first page, and began to flip through chapters.
This is genuinely Hurricane's work, although this name I didn't recognize. Commander Typhoon?
Rainbow Dash put a stone chair closer to the table and sat down.
Maybe we should read it then. I bet a Typhoon guy explains himself some point in the text.
Twilight nodded and used her magic to pull a chair of her own behind her.
Well, there's no time like the present to start. Let's get some food cooking, and while we wait we can read.
Taking a deep breath, she turned to the first page and began to scan the text.
The following events have been compiled from memory from the best of my recollection.
It is with absolute certainty that I say that the events that happened during these years will be scrutinized to their fullest extent by the pony historians of generations to come. History is a malleable thing, and it is essential that it is recorded and preserved by those who lived it. Clover the Clever has written her own log of what happened, but the sentimentalism in her words assuredly glides over some of the facets of this history and rewrites others. My simple narration here will be enough to fill in part of the story, and logs provided by Commander Typhoon will complete what transpired in my absence. My name is Commander Hurricane, leader of the Syrian tribe, commander of the Royal Guard, and co-ruler of the Principality of Equestria. Within these pages lies the tale of a winter thought eternal, of rising tensions, of famine and death, and of frozen hearths. Forget what you thought you knew, for in all likelihood it has been tainted by the deluge of time. Here begins a tale of founding of a nation, and how it almost came not to be. My name is Commander Hurricane, and this is the truth.